Okay, I'm going to start, if I could, because I want to cover a couple things. Does that work? So I'm going to actually cover a lot of ground, I think, maybe, today. First, I want to tell you, I want to spend maybe 10 minutes telling you a little bit about our plans with Innovation Center. And then I want to talk about board certification, the process, the fundamentals of the process, so you know how it works, but also give you a broader view on why we certify and challenges of certification, and to maybe open up a discussion of that. So first, we will be opening what I think will be a world-class learning center. Certainly hope it will be. Pretty soon. Oh, I just screwed that up. All right, good. We think it'll be around January 1. Depends on a lot of factors. John Raskin's, in particular, if he's here, John has put hundreds of hours into this and is working on this every day. If you look out the back of the orthopedic center, you'll see some concrete walls going up that are really high, and those are for the Learning Center. We are calling it the Utah Orthopedic Surgery, Knowledge, and Innovation Laboratory, because then we can say it's the Orthopedic Ski Lab. That's why we do that. And set up this way, if you look from the top, so about half of the usable space, other than locker rooms, will be for a classroom, which will seat up approximately 55 folks, depends on how we end up configuring things. And then we'll have a 5-day surgical suite that'll accommodate 3 to 4 learners on each table, and we'll have a central table that we think will have be for the faculty member that'll be able to be projected and have a lot of special features. This is no small project, as you might imagine. We're in negotiations with a major supplier to see if we can get much of the equipment in there at a major discount. We're hoping to do that. And we think we hope that it can sustain in terms of its cost by giving courses to local orthopedic surgeons. Industry courses will be will come in and they'll rent the space and the cadavers, etc. And we think we'll be successful with that. And we look forward, this will change, I think this is going to change our educational program in a massive way, and also open up an opportunity for research opportunities that we don't have right now. But it will also open up the ability for us to eventually have a world-class orthopedic innovation center. This is a unique concept, I think, for academic centers. Let me see if this thing works. Let me see if this goes forward. Does this work? There's absolutely nothing up here that has a battery that works. That's at least consistent for them. Okay, so the Innovation Center, I want to go through this for you all because many of you haven't heard about this, and I want to set the stage at least. The mission will be to develop new techniques and devices to improve, and it may be more than techniques and devices, but you can think of it that way, to improve orthopedic patient outcomes. That's the mission. And if you think about it, this requires capital, real capital. It requires talent, and different talent than maybe we have currently. And it has to have the ability to sustain itself. So I'll get into all that. We estimate that the department will need to invest about $7 million over 5 years to get this going. So each project that's selected to be developed may cost $500,000 to $1 million. That's something that you can't do on your own. And that's why this concept of doing it is kind of unique. And I've identified a donor to help with at least 50% of the initial costs. I think we're going to end up being about 80% of the cost covered by our donor. We need a proven, successful executive director, and fortunately we have a medical director from within our group who will be excellent, John Heflin, and he's agreed to do it. I don't think he's here today, he's sick today. But we need a proven, successful executive director, and without this, it'll fail. And we've identified the person It's Wade Fallon. He's going to join us October 1. You can see what's listed here, but most important to him, I think, is that he's created, and there are currently about 250 people working in Logan supporting their families in companies that he's built and sold. He's has over 200 issued patents. An issued patent in itself is somewhere between a successful R1, maybe an unsuccessful R1 in terms of the work that goes into it. It is an enormous amount of work to get issued. The file may not be as much, right? So he's a superstar in the orthopedic world. Everyone who is in senior management across the country in the orthopedic industry knows and respects Wade, high integrity person, and I'll bring him, when he gets here, I'll introduce him to you all, and hope that if you have interest in working in this area, you get a chance to work with him. We need favorable terms for investing, and the way, as a department, and the way it works here is a University of Utah Research Foundation that up to now has kept all the money from any upside. I think as a result of that, there's been very little upside coming from orthopedics to the university. In fact, I don't think any. As far as so, what they've agreed to is a 5-year pilot, and we're using the FIFO approach, which is first dollars in are the first dollars out. So if the department puts money in, the department gets its money out. Okay, that's very important to be sustainable. Now, so what happens? Just so you get this clear in your mind, if there's a $1 million investment and the buyout is at $2 million, okay, the department gets its $1 million first. And the $2 million, the second $1 million is split 30% to the inventors, 70% to the University of Utah. Of the university share, the department gets equal to the University of Utah Research Foundation. Okay, so that's how it works. So it's very different, just so you have this clear, and the faculty need to understand this who are inventing stuff. If you go through the standard process with the university, the first dollars may not be taken off the top. It depends on how you arranged it. But in this, the first dollars are taken off the top. So the investing dollars come back to the investor, which in this case will be the department. We need a way to attract and promote along an innovation pathway, or otherwise we cannot attract people like Wade Fallon. So the department developed a second path for research faculty in addition to the discovery research path that all of our current research faculty, we have almost 10 of them now, approximately 10, are on. We're establishing a new track called the Innovation Research Track. It has to go through a Senate committee. It's actually coming to the committee next week, and we'll see if we get it approved. It's the first time actually any department has done this, so we'll see if we get. I don't think it's going to be a problem, but we'll see what the boulders are in our way to get there. We're planning to open this the concept at least late fall 2019. The initial orthopedic innovation center team will be an executive director, medical director. We will hire 1 to 2 engineers and 1 to 2 machinists, and we need comprehensive prototype capability so that we can move quickly. If you use a shop in town and you know them really well, you're going to wait about 8 weeks for your little part to be made. Then you're going to try it in a cadaver. Then you're going to say, I want to change this. You're going to wait another 8 weeks. You're going to wait another 8 weeks. And you'll have 4 or 5 or 6 cycles in a year. We want to move a lot more quickly because the people that are listed here are all on the payroll, right? And that costs a lot of money. So we can't find local real estate to put the equipment we need in because of the requirements of the equipment. Electrical requirements, the size of the door to get it through, they have to be on grade. This stuff is way too heavy to bring up or down a floor. And so we're going, for the first 2 years, I haven't signed the contract, but it'll happen in the next month, sign a contract to go into what's called the U-Star Innovation Center. It's not exactly next door. It's 37 minutes from here. I just looked it up. But it's an amazing facility for us to go into. We're going to get the blue space, but we get use of almost all the other stuff. And some of the equipment in there is wild. And we get use of their equipment. And so we had on our sort of equipment list some stuff, and they have equipment there, and so it turns out that 4 of the major machines that we want, they already have, and all we have to do is pay for supplies. Some of these machines cost $200,000. So they're big, and I don't know what they do, but they're very impressive to me. I actually do. If you go watch one of these, you can't believe this. This thing goes in, finds the tool it wants, comes over, grinds something out, brings it back, puts the tool back in its place, which is different than my kids, and then goes to the next thing. Okay? And anyways, so our vision is to accelerate innovation outcomes. We want to increase faculty and training, and I mean this sincerely, that I think good ideas will come from medical students, will come from residents, will come from fellows, come maybe from some of the faculty. And I want to develop a gravitational field to attract and recruit innovators into the department and to build something special here around that. I think we can do it. It's consistent with the state's view of itself as entrepreneurial. It's consistent with the West and how people in the West look at themselves, and I think it's a good idea. Now I'm going to shift gears. So that's that. I'm trying to squeeze that in, but those are very important big changes in the department that are happening in this year. Huge changes. And they didn't happen, they happened over a long period of time, but they're all sort of coming to fruition now. I'm going to shift gears to talk about orthopedic certification because I want to give you some insight into what I now know a lot about and talk about the past, the present, and the future. The objectives are to understand the key elements of the profession. I've talked with the residents about this about 2 years ago. Emphasize the crucial importance of peer review and self-policing to the credibility of our profession. If you forget everything else, that's probably the most important thing here. The mechanics of ABOS processes of certification, recertification, the changing demography of U.S. orthopedics, and the resulting challenges of subspecialization on recertification. This is the biggest thing in front of us in ABOS. And to envision how patient-reported outcomes can help surgeons identify learning opportunities, which is one of the initiatives of the board at this point. So this is the current board. Not very diverse, okay? I'm the most unhappy person in the picture. I've been on the board for 7 years this winter. By this winter meeting, I've been on it for 7 years. I talked to the senior faculty here before I joined it to see if it felt about the right thing for us, and I think it's been good. It's been a very interesting journey for me, and it's given me some insight into how to make this program, work with this program to be exceptional. We try to have subspecialty diversity, and we strive for academic, non-academic diversity, but we actually don't get many non-academic folks who are interested in serving. It's a volunteer job. I dressed up for you today, as you can tell, and I wore the free tie. That's what I get. Actually, I think I have 3 of them if anybody wants one. And it's 35 days a year. It's somewhere around 5 weeks a year, 4 weeks to 5 weeks a year for 10 years. So it's a big chunk of your life if you do it. It's actually an amazing experience. If you're asked to do it, if you're thinking about doing it at some point, it's an amazing personal experience because you work with such smart people on hard problems. This single book is probably the best book I've read about American medicine. And in this book by Paul Starr, he talks about the key elements of a profession. And this is just one person's view, but so it resonated with me. A profession has a base in technical specialized knowledge. It should be service rather than profit-oriented. Service rather than profit-oriented, enshrined in a code of ethics. And it's occupation that regulates itself through systematic, required training and collegial discipline. And so this last statement is related to certification, recertification. So I want to shift again gears. I'm going to just lay that as a foundation and then shift again gears to what's going on in U.S. orthopedics. This is fascinating to me. First of all, density of orthopedic surgeons. If you want a job, don't go to Wyoming, right? go to something that is, go to South Texas. You'll get a job in a minute. But this is, so there's a maldistribution per population of authors. You would not design the field, you would not design the workforce this way. This is what's happened. So this tells you a little bit about that. This is the male-female distribution, which is horrible. And so 15% of our current residents are women. And if you look at this, active fellows, it's about 6 or 7%. That's where we're at. So there's a time-based factor here. When I trained, there were very few women. But there may be other factors at play here. But that's what's going on. We need to attract more women into this field because we're missing some of the brightest people, some of the best people who don't see this as a field or a career they can go into. This is orthopedics by race and ethnicity. It's also a little skewed. It's not as skewed as the woman-man if you look at medical students. If you look at the demography of medical students across the country, this isn't exactly it. There's more Asians, there's more Hispanics, but it's not as skewed as the woman-male differences. But it's very unusual because the country doesn't look like this. And so one of the questions that comes up is, should you look like the people you're taking care of? So there are arguments for that. All right, here's something of real interest. This is, to me, this is the most amazing piece of data I've seen. This is a survey the Academy did, 7,658 respondents. So it's a very robust sample. It's about half of the orthopedic surgeons that were asked about this. And these are their ages that are surgeons who are working full-time or part-time. The average age of an orthopedic surgeon is growing older. In 2008, the average age was 51. In 2016, just 8 years later, it's 56. By now, it's probably 57, right? So people are not retiring. It has big impact on a lot of things, in my opinion. And one of them, certification, how do you do it? But another one is actually how do you structure call? How do you structure responsibilities in groups? How are you appropriately treating your younger partners? Is there room for a younger partner? So this is the U.S. population by age, period, okay? This is everybody. And fairly recent, 2016. My mother's 92. I don't think she's going to make it very much longer based on this, right? Here is superimposed on it, and this isn't completely accurate, but this is best I can do, is the people who are working and making money. There are people working not making money, right? They're taking care of the kids or their parents or whatever they're doing. But this is who's working and making money and their ages. So that's that, okay? That's across the country. That's what it looks like. These are orthopedic surgeons. This is what the rest of the country's doing. This is what orthopedic surgeons are doing. This is what airplane pilots are doing. Commercial airplane pilots, they're done at 65. They're out. So the board has to deal with this, okay? And we have to, as a profession, more importantly, deal with the fact that we have older people who are in the field and may be excellent or may not be excellent, same as for younger people. But this is a changing demographic issue. Another changing demographic issue is where people work. And this is fascinating also. 27% of those 70 and older are in solo practice, where 2.8% under 40 are in solo practice. And if you look at these data, people are going into group practices, they're going to academics has had a huge explosion in size, which has other implications, and they're going to work for hospitals today. They're also subspecializing. So this is the folks who come to us and say they're subspecialized or they're mostly subspecialized when they're taking their examinations. Fascinating. And the subspecialists are doing more surgeries, okay? So if you look at the numbers of cases that are being done by surgeons, this is just an aside, subspecialists do more surgeries, are more satisfied with their work, more satisfied with their life than the generalists are. Okay, now this is what people self-identify as. You never can have enough sports medicine doctors. Isn't this interesting? And so what the board faces and what the profession faces is, how do you certify these folks? How do you recertify somebody who's say a shoulder and elbow or an oncologist or whatever is down the list here? How do you recertify? How do you have an exam that can actually go at what they're working at and know that, feel comfortable that they're still competent? It's challenging because the general orthopedic exam, which I've taken now 2 or 3 times, 3 times, is hard if you don't do something, if you focus on foot and ankle, right? It's a pretty hard test. So the mission of the board hasn't changed. It's to ensure safe, ethical, effective practice of orthopedic surgery. ABOS maintains the highest standards for education, practice, conduct through examination, certification, and maintenance of certification. And here's the important point: for the benefit of the public. And it's actually for the benefit of the profession, too, because the profession doesn't maintain standards, the public will not respect the profession, will not trust the profession, and it's not where we want to go. So I'm going to give you a little history about this. We've not always had board certification. The movement started in 1917. The AMA began to think boards were needed to set standards for quality because there was tremendous variation, and there still is, I think. There is evidence, and the AMA thought there was an evidence of need for continued monitoring and promotion of quality. Well, that statement is true today. The first board was ophthalmology, and it took another almost 20 years before other boards were established. I think that's a long time. And the next wave in 33 were these, and then orthopedic surgery in 34. In 1991, the 24th board was approved. It was medical genetics. So there were 24 members of the American Board of Medical Specialties, ABMS. So related to us, and this is important, the AOA, the Academy, and the AOA, and which is the American Orthopedic Association, which at that time was founded in 1887. At that time was an elite organization populated by Boston Brahmins and New York City upper class children who became orthopedic surgeons or became surgeons with an interest in orthopedics. It was a very small organization. And it spawned in 1933 with the AMA, the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, because it did not want the pedestrian orthopedic surgeon in it, okay? So it started the Academy. Now the Academy is the big guy now, and the AOA is little, right? So it flipped around, right? Because a lot more people paying dues. Yes. And then the AOA, with the AMA and with the Academy, helped establish this American Board of Orthopedic Surgery around quality and competence. And the reason that's important is that we still select members of the board from slates presented by the Academy, by the AOA, and by the AMA, which seems absurd right now that the AMA is involved, because not most orthopedic surgeons are not active in the AMA. It's a private, voluntary, well, they do get a tie, nonprofit autonomous organization, exists to serve the best interests of the public and the profession, establishes educational standards for orthopedic residents. So this is very important. We're now pivoting, as I'll tell you at the end, and diving into residency. And we're going to change residency slowly with help of the Council of Residency Directors over the next 5 years. For very clear reasons, and I'll try to explain that, and evaluates the qualifications, competency of practicing orthopedic surgeon. So Phil Levine, who wrote a book in foot, Ryerson from Mayo Clinic, Meyerding, you've asked for a Meyerding in the old OR, Chandler, you asked for a Chandler in the OR, John Wilson, who was from New York. These are the guys. Melvin Henderson is also from Mayo Clinic. These folks were started it and were the first board members. And they were grandfathered in, and every orthopedic surgeon, I believe at that time, was grandfathered in. So you, boom, you were board certified. But then after that, things changed. In 1935, the ABOS introduced a written exam. In 1986, we had the first time-limited certificates that really upset orthopedic surgeons, that their certificate that they received when they got done with residency wasn't for the rest of their life. So we have now still thousands of diplomats, they're called diplomats when you're board certified, diplomats who have certificates that are not time limited, who are practicing in the United States. And it's that right side of that age curve, okay? And we have no way to ask them to recertify. They're just practicing. And then in 2009, because of CMS actually, which I'll get to, something called maintenance to certification began. I'll try to explain that. The faculty will be interested. This is an exam from 1937. No, this was not the exam. This was the eligibility. So right from the start, there were questions about the character of orthopedic surgeons, and it was peer review, and peer review goes to today. And so you can see some of the comments, like Dr. Wielden is a very capable man, but I do not regard him as a very high character. So if you get enough of these today, you will not be allowed to sit for your board examination, okay? Because the credentials committee will see that and will push you off from being able to sit for the exam to become certified. So peer review started at the beginning. Here was the written exam. Wouldn't you like this? You have 4 hours. Discuss condition known as pseudoarthrosis of the tibia and describe its clinical course. Classify various forms of chronic arthritis. Blah, blah, blah. You keep going down and describe various types of fractures in the region of the elbow. This would kill you guys. You haven't written any essay for like 10 years, right? You couldn't do this. You wouldn't even know how to start organizing your brain because you've been trying to answer questions. See how lucky you are? Okay. All right, so candidate eligibility today. You have to complete an ACGME accredited orthopedic residency program. You cannot come from a non-ACGME. There's an international pathway that's very tough to get through. If you're extremely prolific academically and you've been 5 years in one place, you can be allowed to sit for board certification, and you have your U.S. licenses and all that, and you passed everything else. That's the only way you can get in as an outsider right now. Demonstrate competence in orthopedic surgery, demonstrate adherence to ethical and professional standards, and there's a big emphasis on that. Declared eligible by the credential committee, and then you have to pass peer review. And actually about 2% don't pass peer review, which is not trivial, especially if it's you. The exam, the written exam is 328 questions. This is the breakdown. You can get extra time. You have to ask for it. If you have a disability, learning disability, you can request that in advance. There's a short tutorial at the beginning, and then you go through this standard examination. This is what it was like when I took the exam. I would guess several people here went to the Palmer House. You sat there. The guy next to me had 2 bottles of Maalox, which was for indigestion, right in front of him. And on my way out, a guy said to another, "Well, see you next year." So there are people taking it all the time. It was a very intense thing. Everybody in there was wearing a tie or the clothes that and the monitors, the board directors were walking up and down making sure you weren't cheating, but you couldn't cheat because you couldn't see anything. And then everybody had a different exam. But now you just go in and take it next to somebody who's doing her exam or his exam for, I don't know, for cosmetology school or something. So this is now we have a blueprint. This year we came out with a blueprint. This should be a study guide. It'll tell you what to spend time on and what not to spend time on. If you look at this closely, you might decide you spend more time on basic science principles than biostatistics if you just are a betting person. on this one, right? Because that's, the blueprint is the percentage of questions on the test. All questions are worth the same. That'll be related to that subject, okay? So if you spend a little more time on biomechanics and biology, then maybe on something else on this list, statistical power and type 2 error. The examination is an excellent exam, and nothing's perfect, but it is completely different than the OITE. Completely different. In fact, the OITE is we're going to start helping the OIT, weaving the board, helping the OIT develop a better exam because it is horrible. Psychometrically horrible. It doesn't hit what we need it to hit. It's going to start following our blueprint, which is better. Okay, so how does this exam go? So this fall we write questions, the writers write questions. The National Board edits the questions, which is a whole process. Then we meet in April and we go through all the questions. About 2/3 of those questions that have been written are thrown out right there. We're in a room for foot and ankle. We'll be in a room, say, with hand folks, and the hand folks will say, oh, that's a really stupid question. The foot guys will say, well, that's a weenie little question. Who needs to know, about that? And so we go back and forth to try to make it as good as possible. We have 4 or 5 foot people and 4 or 5 hand people, maybe a few others in the room, to make sure they're reasonable for a general exam. Then it goes to the item bank, and then they build the test. And then the test goes to something called a field test task force. I'm on that as well. We again go through all the questions, and again change about 20% of the questions in person. So the OIT, nobody meets in person ever. Okay, they just send questions in. And then it goes to the ABOS board, and we take the exam. And then we go through it. We take it with everybody in the room. We go through every question, and again, a bunch get thrown out. It's amazing. They've gone through this, and we pulled questions from old exams that have very good psychometric data on them, so we can use them as equators, statistical equators, and then it's administered, and then we validate it, and we get rid of some questions that don't do well, even though we thought we were doing well. And then we do a final scoring and a standard setting. And the standard setting is that the same standards are used. We believe that if you took the exam 5 years ago and you took it today, you'd have the set point, the pass point would be the same, although it changes every year in terms of the number of people who pass. And then the results are reported. This is just a few tips. Bring your scheduling permit to the examination, okay? You'll get a lot of information about that. And you get your results early September, late August. The pass rate is very high right now for first-time test takers. People are getting better and better at taking these tests, actually. And so the pass rate's very high. It doesn't disturb us at all because we know it relates very well to the test we gave 10 years ago and what the pass rate, what the set point for passing was. But that just tests knowledge. Then you take part 2 after you presumably your fellowship and training and get into practice, and it's an application of knowledge test. Lack of knowledge definitely equals incompetence, right? But knowledge doesn't mean you're competent, and so this is getting at that part. This is a little different. It's evolving, keeps evolving, but basically you're showing cases and 2 people are looking at them, and you're showing 12 cases. So what you do is and this is important for the fellows who are going to be doing this, there's a 6-month case list submitted electronically. So starting April 1 for 6 months consecutively, every single case you put in. And I would suggest you are the person doing it because it really matters. Complications, we categorize them just like we do for QA here. Then we have an artificial intelligence program that comes in and selects 12 cases, and then the board directors review those cases to make sure they're fair, they're representative of your practice, and actually, as this machine learning program has gotten better, it's really fair and it's really good, and the work that the directors do is very little at this point. All the information is electronic now, and then you get into the exam. You have 4 25-minute sessions with 2 examiners each, and then in each session you're going to present 3 cases basically. And there's a scoring rubric. It's online. You need to get an average of 2. If you're below 2, you're going to be in trouble. Now some people are harder graders and others. John Raskin is one of the most consistent graders. He's been there years and years. He's a consistent, I know how consistent everybody, some people are erratic, some people are consistent. The erratic ones we throw out. The hard ones and the soft ones, we actually try to talk them into being in the middle, but it doesn't really matter because we can adjust for how difficult they are, how lenient they are, if you will. So that doesn't matter, but inconsistency, we get rid of examiners. So for fellows, after you get your job, you have to have a job at a hospital with admitting and surgical privileges by November 1, before November 1 actually. Okay, so don't go on that long trip to Italy and come back on November the 2nd, okay? Get started. Or you wait a year, that's fine, just wait a year. But you have to get it done within 5 years of when you're done with your training. Again, you do your case list. Complications are expected. If you don't have complications, they're gonna hone in on you. And try to be accurate. There's a webinar in March that goes through everything, and there are videos at the website that show you what a mock examination looks like. Peer review is also done, so if you're asked to supply the names of people in your location, email helps. We also do peer review of people who don't know you, or who you don't nominate, I should say, who do know you but you don't nominate. And this test doesn't have a very high failure rate, 5 to 8% maybe failure rate, so it's not, most people pass. But that's the process, okay, to there. So to reiterate, medicine has the privilege of self-regulation. Lifetime certification does not guarantee competence, and that's why we're now in the recertification business. And it's shown that certification, recertification associated across medicine with improved patient care, certainly greater adherence to practice guidelines, fewer state board disciplinary actions, which is one thing you can measure, and less costly care. So I have come to think this is very important. So I ask you, should we recertify airline pilots? If you're flying an Airbus A320, should you have to take a test that you know how to do it or do you think you just get done and just fly for the rest of your life with 150 people behind you? So this is a great picture. This is actually a picture taken right before this plane took off. Does anyone remember this? This plane took off. It got up, hit a flock of geese. Both engines went out, lost both engines. And this guy, the first word you hear is "my plane." That's all you hear. He doesn't talk very much. And then he lands it in the Hudson, even though if you listen to the tape, they're trying to get him to land somewhere else, but he realizes he can't. And he says very little. It's actually fun to listen to the tape on this. And later they asked him about it, and he said this: one way of looking at this might be that for 42 years I've been making small, regular deposits in this bank of experience, education, and training. And on January 15th, the balance was sufficient so I could make a very large withdrawal. So he flew an A320, and he tested on an A320 over and over and over again. He actually was one of the guys who did the certification of others. So he was highly involved for his airline in that process. And if you read about him, he's a superstar. So I believe we should be doing that. So if you're an ABOS diplomat and you go on the website, immediately this comes up. And it tells you where you are. This is for the faculty. It tells you where you are in your cycle, what you need to do. There's no mystery. It's not hard. You can call if you want. They'll explain it to you. And then it tells you where you are. I'm in my 6th year of my 10-year cycle. So in my 7th year, can take a test. Or I can start something called web-based longitudinal assessment now, and it could serve as equivalent to a test. Or I can wait till my 10th year and take the test, and if I fail it, I go back to the beginning of the line. I'm not going to do that, okay? I don't want to take the written exam and all that stuff again. But it's a 10-year cycle, and the maintenance and certification process isn't just the test. It's, again, do you have unrestricted license, privileges, and good peer review? Are you doing your continuing medical education? And that all that stuff from the academy goes right in, and for most of the societies goes right into the ABOS website. You don't have to keep track of it. You can load it in if you want. And then there's this test, and it's proctor's exams plus a web-based option. And then the last part, which has not really become a big thing yet, is practice improvement, it's MOC4, which is, we as the board says, if you evaluate, by making a case list, looking at your complications and participating in giving meaningful peer review, that you qualify for this. I don't think this standard that I've just explained to you is going to sit well in 10 years. So I think we'll have to do something more for the last part. Okay, so just to go through your recertification options, you have computer-based recertification, oral-based recertification, and web-based longitudinal assessment, which is new. The computer-based examination is 3 hours, is 150 multiple choice questions. And again, it's prometric, and there are blueprints. And now we currently offer all of these. And each one of these is as much work, almost as much work as getting the written exam together. And if we have a very small number of people taking an exam, say shoulder and elbow, it's not valid statistically. So that's an issue that's looming out there for us, okay? So we may be giving these exams once every 2 years or once every 3 years so we can have a big enough pool. Practice profile exams in sports medicine and surgery of the hand can qualify for a subspecialty certification, and there are certificates of added qualifications in those areas, or it can be just taken. If you're don't have a CAQ in sports and you want to take the sports exam, you can take it and you can qualify for your Part 3 every 10-year recertification. So we have blueprints for everything. You could come in and take an oral exam, and in many ways, oral exam is the best exam we give. It's a lot of work, and there's some risk because the recertifiers don't do quite as well as the first-time takers. They don't read, they don't know the literature, they did it the way they were taught in residency, and they explained that to us, even though they did residency 30 years ago. And yeah, so they don't do quite as well. The spine guys do the worst, by the way, and consistently. It's tough. And the rest is here. So the one difference is when you're recertifying, you get your case list is 75 consecutive cases starting in January, and you're done. So if you're a hand guy doing trigger fingers, you're done in a week. And if you're a tumor guy, it could take you a whole year to get 75, or you might not get 70, or a spine guy, but 35 is the minimum for a year, okay? Because there's some tumor docs and some spine docs doing very complicated things actually don't do very many individual cases. We have this new pathway we just started called the web-based longitudinal assessment, which is taken off and might replace the sort of, quote, high-stake exam. So I'll try to go through that. The rest of the application is exactly the same. You still do peer review. You still have to get through the credentials committee that you haven't. Credentials committee looks at everything. Like, have you lost your license? Has it been taken away from you? And if it has a hospital kicked you out? And if it has, we dig in. I was head of credentials committee, and there's some bad stuff going on out there. One guy pulled up his truck and stole a large. Well, I don't know if he admitted to stealing it, but he hooked up a very large yacht to the back of his truck and drove away and was caught. There's all kinds of stuff that comes out you can't believe. So it made it interesting, at least. So this new thing called web-based longitudinal assessment, diplomats customize their assessment. This is important. You take the assessment on your own computer, where you want, and it's trying to encourage up-to-date learning, and and we give immediate correct or incorrect scores. So this is a big project. And each January, 100 new orthopedic knowledge sources, which is mostly articles, practice guidelines, are chosen and put up on the website. Plus some of the old ones will still be up there that you can choose from in these areas. And in each of these areas, we've gotten cooperation from the affiliated subspecialty societies and representatives to make sure that we're on target with what's important. So this was last year's couple of lists of 10 articles that were chosen. And then you, as a diplomat, you choose 15. So if you're a foot and ankle, there's only 10 foot and ankle. You got to choose 5 others, right? 30 questions are delivered to the diplomat, 2 on each. And you take it during this time period, and you're given 3 minutes. You got it, and then there's a way you have to get most of the questions right over a period of years, and then you don't have to take a test. And you just, if you are wanting to do that, you just go to this spot, and you just pull up all 9 of the sources, and then you pull this up, and they pick this article by Higgins as a second or third author. You didn't get your name there, Thomas. It says Seymour, but our article, we know it's by Higgins, right? This was the required article last year. It was the article that Thomas helped write on the opioid epidemic. And so you have to take that one. And then they give you an example. I love this. So they say, you want an example to see what's going on. And this is the example. According to Chalmers et al., study on rotator cuff. So now we got our second thing up there, right? And natural history of rotator cuff cases, which is the following: significantly different patients who underwent rotator cuff repair when compared to patients who are treated without surgery. I have no idea, actually. Where's Chalmers? Do you know the answer to this? What's the answer?
I told you. You didn't get the question right. You can read the article.
All right, I'm guessing. Let me see. It's tough. I only have 3 minutes. I'll go with elevation strength measures. How did I do? Wrong? All right, I got that one wrong. And then, but the other 98%, other than me, earned a quality year. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about the future, where we're going. We're really going into resident. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to ultimately help define a curriculum for orthopedic residency, which doesn't exist really. You know, you're in the, what Larry Marsh likes to call time-based, or he calls it like seeping a tea bag. We stick you in the water, and after 5 years, we take the bag out, and you're perfect, right? So we're going to form a curriculum. There's a PGYON surgical skills toolbox that you know about. There's an assessment project going on now, surgical skills assessment project that we're not part of. Is Dr. Rothberg here? Yeah. We may want to become part of it. And there's a pilot study on the way about behavior. So we sort of think about behavior, knowledge, and skills as the sort of trifecta of what we want to accomplish in a residency. And one of the reasons for defining curriculum is the work that was done by Coring, Jessica Coring here, Alan Stotts, in our group here. That's been 2 of the 3 articles that have been published. The third one's coming out in JBJS, maybe now or around now. That's a series of articles looking at different aspects of training related to practice, if you will, and perceptions by people in practice versus training. And one of the articles, one of the things we did was look at what people do in residency and what people do in practice. And these are things people are doing in practice a lot more than we're doing in residency, percentage-wise, although you guys get your fair share of this here. And these are things being done in residency more than people are doing in practice, early practice at least. And then these are the perception of the mean number of cases that need for independence by residents who are graduating, and the actual numbers that they performed. And you can see that they're not exactly concordant. So that suggests that, and they see these sort of like deficiencies in terms of the numbers during residency, and maybe deficiencies in the pediatric experience compared to what people think you need to be independent when you leave. Hence, to some extent, why people do fellowships. But we're beginning to sort of decide that certain things are essential for your education. Third things are nice to have, and certain parts of the experience, like doing total ankles with Charles Saltzman, may not be that important, okay? All right, so finally, I want to just talk about CMS. CMS. Here is the Social Security Act. Has anybody read this, Section 1848? Very important, actually, because this is why the feds pay physicians. This is the rules for feds paying physicians. And so you might think, well, I'm not going to take care of that many federally insured patients, but you will. So one of the parts of this Security Act is that they require maintenance of certification. That's why maintenance of certification exists. That's one of the fallacies out there, is that the boards brought maintenance of certification and made people do it. The boards didn't do that. It requires a physician to implement a quality improvement intervention to address a practice weakness identified, and then to reassess, basically. So if you think the feds don't matter, full-time workers and physicians get about 40% of their income from the feds. Okay, so, and I think it does matter. It's not getting smaller. So now we have a patient-reported outcome program that we've started. It's part of the surgical list, actually all 6 months. It's done in a span, it's the same that we do in clinic here. We ask for English, we ask promise physical function CAT on everybody, or the upper extremity scale, and we do a pain interference scale, which we may get rid of. It's in English and Spanish. The patients receive an email from the board asking them to fill this out before at 6 months and 12 months post-operatively, and then we get things like that. So this is for, I've forgotten the data source of this, but basically, I think this is for an individual, but it might be for a group. Pre and post-op by CPT code of how that individual's patients did. And then we can also generate this kind of a curve, which I think is really interesting, which is how patients do 6 months after a total hip arthroplasty, which you know is our best, probably our greatest operation, I think, that we do in orthopedics as a field. And at 6 months, the change in the physical function CAT, where a 5 change would be clearly, we would consider clinically important, would be a clinically important difference. So you can see that most patients are around a 10 or even 15 change at 6 months, which is remarkable. And then it shows you, that's for the country, and then it shows you where yours are at, which is on the bottom. So this kind of data we will be able to give diplomats back if they want to participate. It's now a benefit of board certification. We haven't really communicated this very well yet because you have to set up the backside, but it's voluntary. You get aggregated de-identified data is used for benchmarking. Only the surgeon sees their own individual data, and you can use this to compare to benchmarks, and you can use this to figure out where you have a deficiency maybe, and you're not doing as well as the rest of the surgeons with your patients, and then go and take a course, and that satisfies the sort of virtuous cycle that MOC4 imagines. Okay, and it's also free to diplomats. So the objective of this talk was to understand the key elements of a profession, to emphasize the crucial importance of peer review and self-policing to the credibility of our profession. Again, when you get a form that asks you to complete, to evaluate a colleague, even if they're your partner, if they're your competitor, if you know their work well enough to comment, please fill it out, and fill it out honestly and with integrity, obviously. I've tried to go through the mechanics, which are very complicated, so everybody sort of understands where they are on the path and for certification, recertification. We're challenged by this changing demography as a board, and the board has to cover all the areas, and we're further challenged now because web-based longitudinal assessment has done so well and is doing so well to know if we can continue to give specialty examinations that are computer-based, because if 90% or 70% of people are doing the web-based, we won't have the numbers of folks to have a statistically valid test to give. So that some of those may go away or be not given every year. And perhaps envision how patient-reported outcomes can help surgeons identify their learning opportunities. And for those who are faculty, I think working on the board is fun. It's hard, but there are different aspects, so you can volunteer, and all you have to do is open up your website, press the volunteer button, and see what's available to you. Thanks for your attention. It's 8 o'clock, so I'll take questions privately. But it is good.